Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to talk, and forgive me speaking in English. I love the French language very much, but I'm very out of practice and would hate to inflict my French on you this morning. The Mediterranean cultural heritage includes thousands of wrecked ships on the seabed, we've heard about them already this morning, and more than 1,000 classical ports and cities on the coast, and hundreds of prehistoric settlements underwater. I am not going to talk about the shipwrecks. We know the position of over 1,100 coastal towns from between 1,000 and 3,000 years old. You can see the red dots on the map, and that shows you that there are really underwater cities, coastal cities in every country on the Mediterranean coast. And the insets show Bronze Age, prehistoric, and classical remains. The ports have structures such as jetties, breeze-lams, fish tanks, docks, which were built with their foundations under the sea, and furthermore, 172 of these towns have sunk under the sea as a result of earthquakes. They are now between 1 meter and 7 meters underwater. Here you see the underwater ruins, the breakwater, 2,800 years old at Amathus in Cyprus, a submerged fish tank at Piscina at Apollonia in Libya, a submerged well at Atlit, and divers working on the ruins at Caesarea. At Naples, you have 11 cities underwater, which are presently being scheduled. I think they've been proposed as a World Heritage Site. And in Turkey, on the right there, you see a town which has sunk under the sea, and just the tops of the windows and doors sticking out of the water. The image on the left shows that we can map buildings underwater with acoustics. Ancient ports were very complex, and this shows a reconstruction of a harbor from about 2,000 years ago with separate basins for warships, trading vessels, and fishing boats, technical barriers to deflect the waves, and tanks for fishing and extracting salt. The oldest underwater city in the world is at Pavlopetri in southern Greece. It is an area of over 8 hectares of ruins. I'll be working there again next week. It's a very beautiful site. And it's the largest area of Bronze Age ruins on mainland Greece. If we look at the older sites around Europe, the continental shelf, shown on this map in the gray. So I'm checking how the colors look on the screen behind me. The gray area is the continental shelf, which is shallower than 150 meters. This area was dry during the ice ages, the âge de glace, and so that for the last 1 million years, Europe was 40% bigger than it is now. The land area on which prehistoric people could live was 40% larger than modern Europe. This image is somewhat subjective. I haven't got time to describe each of the sites there, but the map shows things from the prehistoric period back to 100,000 years, which have been found on the seabed. The skull in the center there is Neanderthal, about 70,000 years old, from the center of the North Sea. There are caves which were occupied 100,000 years ago, and walls and buildings from 7, 8, 10,000 years ago. And on the left, you can see a mammoth skull being pulled out of the sea. If we look at the Mediterranean in terms of underwater prehistory, that is the history of the last 1 million years underwater, there are numerous sites all round the coast of the Mediterranean and the straits, for example, between Tunisia and Sicily, between Morocco and Spain, in which people were migrating from Africa into Europe and Asia. We cannot understand the origin of humanity in Europe unless we understand the underwater prehistory of the Mediterranean. This map shows the migration routes into and out of Africa and Europe and Asia. Again, in fact, more than 1 million years, perhaps over 2 or 3 million years, and the critical straits which we have to look at through archaeology on the seabed. The Adriatic, 20,000 years ago, was almost completely dry. You could walk from Italy to Croatia across the center of the Adriatic. And we know roughly where the rivers were. And we can do the same for the Ebro, the Nile, and so on, studying the rivers on the seabed. In the south of France, there is the very famous Grotte Cosquer. I was diving here in the 1960s, but didn't find it. And the divers who went in there in the 1980s and 90s entered through a tunnel 40 meters underwater and found at the back of the cave that there were paintings dating from 19,000 years old and 27,000 years old. That cave was occupied when the sea level was more than 50 meters lower than it is now. If we are looking for the technology, and Michel Leur has already described some of this, mapping and working on the seabed will require submarines, remote-operated vehicles, divers working with trimix and nitrox gas, and there are laboratories throughout the Mediterranean already collaborating to make this technology available for archaeologists. The sites, I'm afraid, are being damaged in many cases. I started doing this work 50 years ago, and I have seen several underwater sites either damaged or destroyed in that time. Apollonia in Libya is part of the Cyrene World Heritage Site, but the waves have knocked down a sea wall, which was over 2,000 years old, a solid wall of rock, and destroyed it. The site of Pavlopetri, where I am working at the moment, is being very well protected by the local authorities in Laconia. Each site requires careful attention and preservation. Sabrata in Libya also is being very well protected. And there's a lot of work going on in the Nile Delta on the Canopus and Heraklion sites. We have to use the procedures and agreements already in place in the Mediterranean to exploit national and local archaeological authorities and work together through big scientific programs and archaeological programs in order to protect these underwater sites. I'm particularly interested at the moment in prehistoric sites. That's material older than 5,000 or 10,000 years, and we have 2 European Commission-funded projects, which I can talk with people afterwards in the corridors if you wish. Thank you very much.